So we're going to resume, and we've got a presentation from Michael, Korneliusz, and Michael on persistence of economic activity in different historical contexts, looking at the role of high-quality entrepreneurship. Over to you guys.
Okay. Many thanks. Hello and welcome. This is a joint work and joint presentation with Cornelius and Michael, and we're gonna make a split presentation. So I just remembered in the title that you mentioned there's the word persistence. However, I mean, our paper is about the persistence of entrepreneurship, but we don't like the persistence anymore so much. So this is a paper about persistence, but we don't like the word persistence so much anymore, because persistence is just an indication for historical roots, for historical determinants. And that's why I call our paper The Roots of Regional Entrepreneurship in Different Historical Contexts, because we think historical roots is a much more comprehensive topic as compared to persistence. So our questions are because I mean many papers have found persistence for Germany, for Sweden, for the UK, for the US, and for a Russian region, Kaliningrad. We found some persistence, but the question is still, what does it mean? Do all kinds of entrepreneurship have the same effect, or the different effects according to the types of entrepreneurship? What is the role of the historical context for persistence of entrepreneurship, and the role of the present context for the persistence of entrepreneurship? And for example, is persistence of population necessary for persistence of entrepreneurship? So what is the role of this intergenerational transmission of historical attitudes and values and so on for the persistence of entrepreneurship? And particularly, what are the channels by which the entrepreneurship is transferred across generation? And we investigate this. Our example for investigating these questions is the case of Poland, and Poland is a very interesting case, because Poland has experienced quite a number of disruptive changes over the course of the last 100 years. So the environment and the context of Poland is anything else than persistent. So Poland is a country that didn't exist for about 200 years, and then it was refounded in the year 1918. And you can see the different parts of Poland with different external countries that owned or that occupied Poland. So you see Austria-Hungary in the south until 1918, Russian territory until 1918. Then there was a part of German territory until 1918, and then there was German territory until 1945, the end of the Second World War. And after the Second World War, there were more than 40 years of socialist regime with a Soviet-style planned economy and a shock transformation to a market economy afterwards. Poland is also a very interesting case because it is economically very diverse. So you had the very well-developed German part in the west of the country, which was highly industrialized and highly developed. However, the northern German part was not so developed. It was very agricultural and backwards. And the Polish part was dominated by agriculture. Many parts of Poland was at that time economically poorly developed, backwards, technologically far behind, and there were only rather small spots of manufacturing industries, some of them medium successful at that time. So we investigate the persistence of entrepreneurship, and we have developed the main hypothesis for our work. And I must confess that we formulated this hypothesis after we knew the results. So this is a hypothesis, and it's an attempt to explain what we find. And this hypothesis or explanation is that it is the high quality entrepreneurship that may have a very persistent effect on entrepreneurship over a longer period of time, in the face of many disruptive shocks, as can be has been experienced in Poland. Why should high quality entrepreneurship be so important and have such a strong effect? We think high quality entrepreneurship is something that requires a specific set of knowledge, qualification, and entrepreneurial abilities. And our example for high quality entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship or self-employment in knowledge intensive industries. And because entrepreneurship in knowledge intensive industries tends to be innovative, it requires, it is risky and requires the ability to take risk as one of these entrepreneurial abilities. And because it's so innovative, it has often a larger potential for economic success and for higher returns. And it's likely to create more promising opportunities and to leave a greater imprint and effect on the region. And of course, it is then more likely to be remembered positively and create something that we call a collective memory in the local population, what will be explained later by Michael. And so I give over to Korneliusz, please.
Okay, so we want to explain the current startup rates, overall startup rates by the self-employment rates in knowledge-intensive industries, and now you know why. But what is very, very important here is what we define by the knowledge-intensive industries in the past. So there's, of course, a big difficulty in defining knowledge-intensive industries in the past, but we draw on the previous studies. And we take machinery and electrotechnical equipment, basic precious metals, watches, clocks, precision instruments, and chemical industry. But of course, we know that there are many more, but these are the industries that we can compare between Polish and German part of Poland. Yes, and also what Michael suggested, we want to see the role of mobility in the persistence effect, and we we know that high quality entrepreneurship should require persistence of population, but it's not necessarily the point, because we know the example, for example, of Kaliningrad, that nearly all the population was replaced, and still there is persistence of entrepreneurship. Okay, so I move on because we are running out of time. What we took as main variables of interest. So the current entrepreneurship we calculate on the labor market approach. So we divide the number of startups by the total workforce. So it means both employed and unemployed people here. And the total number of startups is taken out of the longest period that we can collect. So this means the 2003 and 2019. The historical entrepreneurship cannot be done in the same way because we don't have the data on the startups. So we take self-employment to capture the entrepreneurial tradition. And we know that from the previous literature that self-employment and startup rates is very correlated. So this makes sense. Okay, so let's have a look at both maps. On the self-employment rates in 1920s in knowledge-intensive manufacturing industries on the left, and you can see that the most of them are located in the western part of Poland, so the former German part, but mostly on the southern west of Poland here, around Silesia, so it's Wrocław here and so on. Conversely, if you look at the map on the right, there are other industries. So self-employment in other industries is located mostly in the eastern part, meaning that the self-employment is related to the quite poor areas of Poland here, and this is much more about the kind of necessity-driven entrepreneurship. And one more indication here also is the level of self-employment rate in knowledge-intensive industries. You can see that these are tiny proportions. So it's 0.17% in former German part, so where there is a lot of self-employment, and only very tiny percent in the rest of Poland. So this is the point, that we take only the small portion of self-employment, and we want to explain the persistence effect of startup rates today. And just a quick look at the startup rates in 2003-2019 per total workforce. Here you can see that this is also mostly located on the western part of Poland. So it might be that the point that we can see here. Here on the left, you have the correlations between the historical self-employment in knowledge-intensive manufacturing, so our main variable, and average startup rates in 2003-2019. It's quite highly correlated here. But for the other industries, the correlation is negative and much lower. We take two groups of controls for the mid-war period. So this is the population density, distance from universities, meaning also distance from the metropolitan areas, distance from coal fields, as previous studies show, also the share of manufacturing as reflecting the industrialization level. And we also take the conditions after World War II, meaning mainly taking into account the migration patterns. Okay, and we take the data from Polish and German censuses for the past, and today Polish census of 2011 for the working population, and also the statistics for the number of startups and the unemployment. Okay, so now it's time to move on to the results, and I give my screen to Michael.
Okay, so this is what we saw already, I think, on the maps, that the relationship between the historical self-employment rate and the current startup rate is not really correlated, which you see on the right side. So there's rather a type of a negative relationship, which I will show you later, not significant in a multivariate regression. But what you see on the left is quite interesting, so that the startup rate, or the historical self-employment in knowledge-intensive manufacturing, is positively related to startup rates today. And this is quite interesting if you check carefully the numbers. So this historical self-employed rate was about, in some areas, 400 times larger, if you want, than the historical self-employment knowledge-intensive manufacturing rate. But actually, it's this very tiny share of startup activity, of high-quality startup activity, that is positively correlated with today's startup rate at large. Yeah, so that's it. Yeah. And then we have these regression analysis, and this is including all the variables also that Korneliusz was already mentioning. We also included interaction effect, where we controlled whether an area was German and or not. And what we see is a strikingly positive impact of this historical self-employment rate in knowledge-intensive industries. And this is quite interesting, and you say, okay, maybe this is simply mirroring a general effect, but apparently if we look into the self-employment rate in non-knowledge intensive industries, so this is the one you saw also, you also saw on the right the picture of this plot, then you see it's negative in a baseline specification, but if we control for other things, it's insignificant. So that means really there is no persistence of entrepreneurship as such. So it's not that high levels of self-employment are related to high level of startups, but apparently it's only the high quality or this tiny share of high quality entrepreneurship historically that plays a role. Yeah, so that's another one. I do not want to torture you too much with regression. This is non-knowledge intensive manufacturing. So just to check that it's not a manufacturing effect that we are capturing. So also for this, there is no effect. It's really this high quality knowledge intensive manufacturing that really matters. So the main findings, to wrap this up.
Yeah, could you just wrap it up?
So yeah, we are running out of time. Yeah, so there is a significant impact of the historical knowledge intensive entrepreneurship and current startup activity. So there is a persistent effect despite these disruptive shocks, which is quite interesting. There is no general persistence apparently. And also very interestingly, we do not see any difference in the effect of this knowledge intensive historical entrepreneurship across former German and already Polish regions. So this means persistence of a population is not required for this type of persistence. Or for this persistent effect of historical entrepreneurship would be more correct. And how to explain that? So the idea is that this is a collective memory of place-specific characteristics. So the people arrive in this area, observe what type of industry structures there have been, and then later on, after the collapse of communism, there is this re-emergence of entrepreneurship because people pick up these place-specific characteristics, and this collective memory might explain this rise of entrepreneurship after the fall of communism. Yeah, and then there's plenty of avenues for further research, which I will skip over given the time, and let's have a lively discussion now on these questions eventually, but also on general topics related to this project. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, guys. This was very, very interesting, especially for me being Polish myself. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Maxim?
Well, thank you very much, both Michaels and Cornel. Not for the first time following your interesting works and the developments, and for more and more countries. I had two questions. So first would be if your high-tech entrepreneurship, or more high quality high-tech entrepreneurship in the past, is it for 2003-2019, are you taking all startups together, or you may be able to differentiate them on high-tech and low-tech as well? So my point is it the high-tech entrepreneurship or industry distribution in the past is more important for the high-tech industry self-employment today, or startups today, or it also has a spillover on least technologically advanced industries or startups in today's Poland? So taking the dependent variable for high-tech versus low-tech is the first question. And the second, we also assume that Poland has changed since 2003 to 2019. Clearly, it's obviously entering the European Union, change in the industry, and a lot of driven by the digital age and digitalization of industries, maybe less dependent on Germany, so less skewed towards West, but maybe the big cities, I don't know, like Krakow, Warsaw, may start playing a bigger role, in particular in IT sector and other tech sectors. So if we check for 2003 as a dependent variable, and then only for after 2011, more new rates. So do we see same pattern, or the pattern starts dying out because of other regions of Poland, kind of maybe big cities in particular, show as being important? All right, these two things.
Can start. Yeah, we actually did not look into high-tech startup rates today because, first of all, we thought it would be maybe less interesting in a sense, because then you could always argue it's a persistence of structures. You had high quality in the past and you have high quality today. So we were more interested in this permeating effect, so in this diffusion effect, which means looking at the total startup activity. And but actually, I also don't know, that's what Cornel can answer much better, whether there are some data limitations for these really high quality startups. At the same time, it might be also difficult to compare high quality historically, so historical industries, with today high quality industries. So as you saw these descriptions, but that would be another stream of research. But for the changes in Poland, I pass to Cornel. The second part of the...
Yeah, but the dependent variable is all startups, we should say. Startups in all sectors.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, there is no, maybe not of course, but there is no limitation on data in high-tech industries nowadays. But of course, they are available, they are comparable after 2009, 2008, let's say, because of the change of the NICE codes. So we could have it for 2009, 2019. And for the second question, I think that we did a robustness check with the startup rates from 2012 to 2019, and the effect is similar. So we don't see any differences here.
Thank you. I suggest we move on to the next presentation. Thank you, guys. That was very interesting. And in terms of evolutionary economic geography, this has some very serious contributions theoretically, I'm sure.